of your last test. I was confident you could finish. Do you know where I was? I was outside watching some deer frolic. You don't even care about the outside, do you?
In our first implementation, gestures were automatically selected based on the player's context. For example, blue might do a special gesture when standing on a floor button. Players became bored of seeing these gestures so quickly that they stopped using them before discovering any of the special context. Because of the control of gestures as a way to express themselves. But when shown the full set from the start, they were overwhelmed by all the choices. By awarding gestures as the game progresses, we allow players to familiarize themselves with each gesture in turn. Leaving visible empty slots in the gesture wheel lets players anticipate that they'll be rewarded with cool new gestures as they progress. The gesture wheel provides quick access so that players can feel comfortable tossing out a gesture during downtime, letting them pick the perfect moment to share a high five.
We have a taunt where one robot steals the other's core. When implemented, it was the only taunt that required one person to initiate. Because of this, we were afraid that it would be used for griefing. We were in the process of rethinking our approach when early playtesters rated this as their favorite taunt. It was also the most used team taunt because it only required one player to initiate and was easier to use than the others. We ended up changing all the other team taunts to emulate the way stealing the core works.
Airlocks were introduced mainly as a way to allow players to focus on individual puzzles. In some of our early investigations, areas contained puzzles that were meant to be solved as a group, as well as others that were for individual solution. But we found that if players could move freely between them, they logically assumed that the individual puzzles were part of one big puzzle. This had bad results. For clarity, we created these airlock-like spawn rooms that act as checkpoints between puzzles. Once both players entered the airlock, we lock off access.
In Left 4 Dead 2, we authored simple, fogged, black versions of the world as monolithic models to avoid the CPU overhead of rendering the world again for water reflections. This worked well for the Left 4 Dead 2 outdoor environments where most light comes from the sky. But Portal 2 is almost entirely indoors, so the color and value of the world geometry is apparent in the water reflections. Since the Portal 2 world geometry is relatively simple, we automatically build a version of the world geometry that has a single texture that combines both texture that has just surface shading. The latter texture is used when rendering dynamic lights. These textures are at the same spatial resolution as the light maps and get packed into a single large atlas texture per level. Drawing this simple world imposter takes very little CPU time, which was a limited resource on Portal 2 due to the many portal views, split-screen views, and water reflection views that we needed to render. We initially planned on using the world imposters only for water reflection rendering, but we ended up using it to improve the where it is used for rendering distant portals and portals that are 2 levels deep. We also used the world imposters to render water in full-screen co-op mode to give us some performance overhead, since the co-op mode has more portal views to render than single-player mode.